Hello, everyone. I'm here with evolutionary astrologer Jordyn Smith, and this is an exciting lecture that I put together with her a couple of months ago. I've been really excited about this for a long time, and it's called A Return to Natural Law. And I'm gonna maybe chime in and maybe ask some questions coming from the standpoint of the viewer, but I'm really gonna let Jordyn take the wheel today and talk. So with all the love in the world, here is Jordyn Smith.
Hello, everyone. This is, first off, thank you for asking me to do this talk. This is near and dear to my heart. I have a lot of Sag in my chart, and Sag correlates to natural law. So let us begin with this lecture. So as B stated, it is titled A Return to Natural Law. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about what natural law is and then the distortion of it, how we can see it in astrology, and then go into some of the transits that are reflecting how we can learn through nature as a way to return to natural law. So, what is natural law? The Oxford Dictionary says that it's an observable law relating to natural phenomenon. And in my own words, I say that natural law is the universal and timeless principles that we can observe in nature. What is true and not an opinion, but can only be felt as real through the intuition, through observation. And this comes through observing nature, including oneself, because we are nature, we're a part of nature, and we aren't separate. And then objectifying what has been learned through others, meaning a need to objectify our learned conditioning. And what is wisdom through objectifying oneself and what is felt to be true. And one of my biggest teachers is Jeffrey Wolf Green, and he has said that natural laws existed before humans even manifested. And evolution is a result of all natural laws that interact within themselves and is in fact the cause of that interaction. Evolution is a natural fact. It happens whether or not humans believe it. The capacity to create something does not mean it can't exist if one doesn't create it. And so I want to talk a little bit about this. Throughout the patriarchal history, it is man who thinks that it has created different things. One of those being fire, right? Fire is a naturally occurring law, and man doesn't have to create it for it to be there. And so it naturally occurs. There are tons of things that have become distortions of natural law that I'm going to get into in a minute. But the fact of the matter is it goes back to this is something that's observable in nature that occurs of its own volition that we can observe. And then through observing it, we can feel for it to be true. And that is what our intuition is. It's not an opinion. The truth cannot be felt through having an opinion. It can only be felt through observing and then on an intuitive level, knowing that it's true. And so some of the natural laws that we can observe in nature are evolution. It doesn't take man to evolve. Man doesn't have to create evolution for it to proceed. We've seen it over, millions of years here on Earth. Fire, wind, rain, and earth are all observable in nature. Giving, sharing, and inclusion is a natural law, meaning that everything has a co-equal function within nature. Everything is sentient and conscious. Consciousness can be different depending on the structure it is in, but it is still co-equal. Indigenous tribes understand this. They know this to be true. They know that plants and animals are all sentient life, and their consciousness is just different than ours. But the fact of the matter, when we're looking at the natural law of giving, sharing, and inclusion, it's rooted in the observation within nature that everything down to minerals, plants, animals, they have a function that helps serve the whole. And if one of those things goes away, it can create some type of collapse. An easy way to look at this is throughout the past few years, there's been a lot of talk about the extinction of bees and what that would do to our ecosystem. And so we know now that bees have a co-equal job just as much as humans do. And if they cease to exist, it impacts the whole. It impacts plants, it impacts other animals, it impacts humans. And so this is observed throughout nature. So what is the distortion of natural law? It is the perversion of natural law that has created distortions on Earth. When we don't look at all life as sentient and equal, it then creates distortions where things are viewed as hierarchical and exclusive instead of inclusive, equating to man-made laws that are exclusive in nature. So a couple of these examples are of the distortions, which, by the way, man-made law teaches us to suppress what is natural. And whenever we suppress something that is natural, it then becomes distorted. Think about if a natural occurring observation of this phenomenon is if you're suppressing your own emotional dynamics, they then become distorted. And then we project all types of dynamics onto others because we've been suppressing our emotional body, which, by the way, for evolution to proceed for humans, we have to evolve through our emotional body. And to see the distortion that's played out, we can see how when we look at the need to express emotions, we live in oppression usually. Don't talk about that, get over it, just be happy. These are all oppressive ways of dealing with emotions that create suppression. And then that suppression creates a distortion within our emotional body. So on a human level, we can see that that's a distortion of natural law. Some of the other examples are that one is separate from nature, that we aren't a part of nature. That's a distortion of natural law. Another one is that beliefs are better than knowing. And I want to just say that there is a word held within the word belief, and it is lie. Beliefs can oftentimes be lies. We think about indoctrination of beliefs that is very different from knowing. Even if you've ever been a part of, grew up in religion, which religion is a distortion of natural law, because religion speaks to hypocrisy and inequalities. That's why women aren't allowed to be pastors or all sorts of different dynamics, or that you have to be perfect. That's a distortion of natural law because source is not perfect. There's nothing perfect that's going to create something that's imperfect. We are actually helping source to evolve through our own evolution because it created something that's imperfect, reflecting its own imperfectness. But in religion, we're taught these kind of cosmologies of perfection, the need to atone, and the biggest thing within religion that's a distortion is that how many of us growing up who were in religion, they just taught us all you have to do is believe without actually teaching us how to know that which we come from. So we can see that a belief over knowing is a distortion of natural law. There are ways to actually know that which we come from, and it is through the breath, which I don't want this conversation to go on too long, so I'm going to kind of move on to the next. And I would love if you guys have questions about any of this at a later time. But another distortion of natural law, remembering that a natural law is rooted in giving, sharing, and inclusion. So whenever we are indoctrinated through the patriarchy, or man-made law that men are better than women. That is a distortion of natural law. Same with animals and plants are less than humans. Think about how we treat animal life. We have puppy mills, and we overpopulate, and then we discard animals because we're looking at them as less than us. Look at the way that people treat, the conception about even snakes or different types of animals that people are afraid of. It's because of the indoctrination that they're bad or something's wrong with them. And also, whenever we're looking at how people want to euthanize different animals, and I'm not talking about because it's about ending their suffering, it's because they're looking at these animals as not equal to human life. All right. So another one is natural resources are at our disposal. No, we're here to help Earth or Gaia. And we aren't supposed to be raping her resources, raping the resources, mining different minerals for our cell phones or for batteries and these types of things is a distortion of natural law. Because what it is we're not giving back to nature, we're just taking and taking and taking and consuming and consuming and consuming. And so it creates imbalances within nature. Dogma as truth that creates exclusion and hypocrisies is another distortion of natural law. I kind of hit on that with the whole religious belief over knowing thing. Colonialism, that speaking to slavery or genocide because one race is better than the other, a distortion of natural law, going back to the natural law of giving, sharing, and inclusion. Manifest destiny, people saying that they're doing God's work and that's why they get to take over land. It's how America came to be. War, rape, discrimination, racism are all distortions of natural law. And the destruction of Earth, which is stemming from the misuse of our natural resources that have created global warming, which then has created diseases and pandemics and famine, and also natural disasters that wouldn't occur had we been treating the Earth as an equal. Meaning that with global warming, we've seen an increase in the strength of hurricanes and tornadoes, all types of dynamics that are observable in nature that we can see are distortions. By the way, whenever society was actually rooted in natural law before the Piscean Age, there was no rape and there was no war because it wasn't looking at man as better than women. And there wasn't a need to take over different bodies of land. There was more of a nomadic lifestyle where people traded and it was communal. And so all of these things, all you have to do is to research this. Around 6,500 years ago, there is no documentation of rape or war because everyone was rooted in the natural law of giving, sharing, and inclusion. So when we look at astrology and the archetypes of natural law, we see it in the mutable axis. And one of the reasons why this is, the mutable axis is where we can, what is the word I'm looking for? We can adapt easily. Mutable energy helps us to have adaptability. And if we think about it, humans are very adaptable. One of the other very adaptable life forms in nature that we see are bugs. They've been here long before us. So when we're looking at the mutable axis, we're looking at Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. And Gemini reflects the diversity in nature as well as flying animals, so like avian creatures. It also refers to the way we classify what we are seeing within the diversification of nature. And then in Virgo, it's the domesticated animals. So if you're someone who has a dog or a cat and you feel, I know most autistic people, they want to be around animals more than they do humans. They typically have a really big Virgo signature or a sixth house signature. Because what I find is that actually most non-neurotypical people are more rooted in natural law. Hence the sense of injustice and feeling it strongly, and feeling animals' pure emotion, and what you see is what you get, and it's easier to commune with them. This is part of this mutable axis, and it's part of the Virgo signature. This is also where we take the information in that we observe in nature and we analyze it on an internal level. And then in Sagittarius, this is the archetype of the daemon soul structure, which is someone who is totally rooted in natural law, that they have taken in what they've observed in nature and they've allowed it to become part of them. It's where oftentimes the daemon soul structure is someone who is rooted in giving, sharing, and inclusion, and feels more at one with being in nature than they do around humans. And it's because they've infused themselves with the totality of nature. That's also where we get the half horse, half human, which, by the way, a daemon soul, and it's really important for me to speak to this when we're talking about natural laws, it stems from the word demon is the distortion of the word daemon. And it is a word that became distorted in patriarchal times because the patriarchy views those who are infused with the totality of nature as demonic. It's why we see different things within that are depicted within religion that are these really terrifying animals and creatures, some of them being half man, half human. And it's because it's just not accepted to be able to commune with nature, to be able to observe in nature. And that's the distortion of natural law. So, and this is, you know, dealing with Sagittarius and Jupiter, it symbolizes nature itself. It symbolizes all of the natural laws, the totality of natural law. And then we are in the Piscean part of the mutable axis. And this is about all animals are pure emotion, because this reflects the Pisces water triad, all right? Pure emotion. And it also reflects sea animals, dolphins, whales, anything like that. And Pisces is also about all of the universal and timeless laws that are held within nature. So if we look at transits in the present moment and what they mean for natural law and the upcoming nodal shift, these are some of the things that I would ask for y'all to start reflecting on through these transits so you can get in touch with natural law. So that way you can have a return to what is natural about yourself. Because most oftentimes through our own conditioning, the things that we've learned through family, society, religion, culture are distortions of natural law. And we are called to recover our actual natures, the undistorted parts of us. And so whenever we're looking at these transits, we can start to observe what is going on as a way to rebalance natural law. So with Pluto and Capricorn retrograde, this is really about the need to resolve the structures within society that are exclusionary and distorted, and the dismantling of those structures. So that means for each one of us, Capricorn is the archetype of self-reflection. So there's a need to go inward and to self-reflect on what our conditioning is. What have we bought into? The beliefs that we have that are actually lies. And Saturn in Pisces is the need to dissolve man-made constructs. Saturn rules Capricorn. So it's the man-made conditioning that distorts natural law, the restructuring of consciousness. Consciousness is Pisces. And the truth of the reality. The totality of truth is Pisces as well. Reality corresponds to Capricorn and Saturn. And then the need to shift from beliefs to direct perception and experience. And the best way to do that is to know yourself through self-reflection and then observing nature itself. Then we have the Libra-Aries axis. And this is the imbalances perpetuated by man-made laws and the need to birth new concepts in order to return to natural law. And it highlights where we haven't been rooted in giving, sharing, and inclusion, and how that perpetuates anger from not listening to others, earth, animals, plants, our resources, or groups of people. Excuse me. So we can see this observed right now with this nodal axis through transit. Whenever the nodes first shifted into Libra and Aries, Pluto and Capricorn was squaring them, directly correlating to the destruction of natural law and the distortion of it, Pluto and Capricorn, and how it was creating imbalances, Libra, and extremes, and the North Node in Aries, war. So we have been observing this since this transit has been going on. And so the natural way to get back into this is through that Capricorn self-reflection, through doing our own inner work and looking at the extremes that are playing out in our own lives and understanding and correlating where that stems from, where in our conditioning, what was learned, created that extreme, that imbalance, and then the need to have the freedom and independence to create new patterns. And that's part of the North Node being in Aries whenever it's naturally expressed. So Pluto in Aquarius is the rebellion against anything that is crystallized in our thinking, stemming from our conditioning, okay? And it's exclusionary, and this is in order for us to transform. So it's liberating from known societal structures that are rooted in exclusion and man-made distortions. And Aquarius also has to deal with a lifestyle change. And so it's speaking to the lifestyle change that is needed to be made within the collective through liberating from the man-made distortions that have become crystallized through the indoctrination and the conditioning. And then Uranus and Taurus, which is the ruler of Pluto and Aquarius, is about transformation of ourselves and our resources, the need to share resources instead of hoarding them. It's our individual lifestyle changes stemming from a transformation into natural values. Taurus correlates with our values and our needs, and Uranus is about transformation and lifestyle. So it's transforming Venus, it's ruled by Venus. Venus is about what we attract. And so it's our inner vibration. And through transforming, we change our inner vibration. And then the messages that humanity receives in order to survive. This is the other dynamic with Uranus and Taurus. Taurus is about our inner listening, as opposed to Libra is about listening to another. It's the psychology of listening, whereas Mercury is more about the mechanics and the nerves and how, the science behind listening. Uranus is our higher mind. It's why we get ideas that drop into our consciousness that can sometimes pretend the future. So there's a lot of wisdom from prior life efforts and through living in natural societies, each one of us, that we could be receiving messages if we connect with our inner listening. And it's about how we survive, and it's about what the natural values and needs are. So I would say to anyone to start paying attention to this, even if it doesn't make sense, if it keeps coming up in your mind, that is something that probably needs to be written down and notated, because it could be a source of survival for you later on down the line. And what I mean by survival is not necessarily death, but it's survival through being self-reliant, through understanding natural law as a means to survive. So then we have the Virgo Pisces nodal shift of 2025. So if right now the nodes in Libra and Aries are really highlighting the imbalances that have been created from the distortions of natural law stemming from man-made law. And Pluto in Aquarius is about liberating from these dynamics in order to have a collective shift. As humans, we can observe this. We don't want to change. And sometimes the only way to change things is through crisis. That's sometimes the wake-up call. It's a universal experience. Crisis induces self-improvement. Anytime that any one of us has had a crisis in our life, we start asking, why did this happen? What do I need to change? And it creates self-improvement through the awareness of starting to ask ourselves that. So the Virgo and Pisces nodal shift of 2025 is going to highlight crisis of what is unnatural being perpetuated, and the need to surrender to what is timeless and universal, the need to improve upon our societal structures, to take what is timeless and universal that we have learned and to apply it to society as a whole. It's the totality of truth, the truth of the reality that we're living in as crisis happens. I don't want to fear monger, but with the nodes in Libra and Aries, there's a lot of no one's doing anything. We're just watching it go down, the extremes and the war and everything. But the dynamic of when Pluto re-enters Aquarius and the nodes shift to Virgo and Pisces, we're going to see natural disasters as a way to highlight how we haven't been honoring Earth as a co-equal, as a relationship of equity and reciprocity, how we've been destroying it. And so there will be cataclysmic events that happen all over the earth. And for some places, it's going to be too late to fix. And in other places, it's going to initiate the improvements that need to be made so that that doesn't happen again. So I wanted to take a look at these charts to really highlight what I've been talking about. So when Pluto stationed retrograde on May 1st, and this is a Greenwich chart, and whenever I use a Greenwich chart, that means that we can look at the house system. Well, the houses that the signs are, the planets are in. Pluto's in the 3rd house in Aquarius. And it was squaring Venus in the 7th house. What this speaks to, and by the way, Capricorn is ruling this 3rd house, which is ruled by Saturn and Pisces in the 5th. What this really reflects is the need to liberate from learned 3rd house conditioning, Capricorn, that has been man-made distortions that are exclusive 5th house in nature, and to dissolve these dynamics so that a restructuring can occur. And with Pluto ruled by Uranus and Taurus, that's in a new phase conjunction to Jupiter. It's about liberating from these old crystallized values that have stemmed from man-made learning, that have been suppressive and oppressive and repressive in nature, and the need to expand upon natural law as a way to survive, and that it needs to be rooted in giving, sharing, and inclusion. That's seen with the 7th house. And so Uranus and Jupiter are also ruled by this Venus that is square to Pluto. And this is what we call a 1st quarter square. And a 1st quarter square denotes a crisis in action. So whenever this Pluto went retrograde, we were meant to create an action around liberating from old values, Venus, that have created distortions within humanity, and to root ourselves back into the natural law of giving, sharing, and inclusion of our natural resources, Taurus, and within all of our relationships within the totality of nature. And that's part of the 7th house dynamic. Venus is also ruling the South Node in the 12th house. So it's the need to culminate these extremes. And then it pulls in Mars approaching the North Node in the 6th house, the need to improve upon what action needs to be taken and to eliminate old patterns. And that's part of Mars culminating into the North Node. is to act on the desires of humanity to culminate these distortions so that new patterns can emerge that are rooted in natural law. And then when Pluto returns to Capricorn in September, you see that Pluto is at 29 degrees and is retrograde in the 7th house. So there are these repeating signatures of 7th house, Capricorn, Aries energy mixed with also the mutable axis. And this is really speaking to patriarchy and natural law. So Pluto in Capricorn in the 7th house is about the need to dismantle these societal structures that are not about giving, sharing, and inclusion, that are not rooted in equity, that are based in exclusionary behavior. Pluto is ruled by, yet again, Saturn and Pisces retrograde in the 10th house. So this is reinstating the need to dissolve old societal structures that are man-made and not rooted in natural law or timeless universal principles. Neptune, the ruler of Saturn, is square Mars and Gemini. Again, it's this repeating signature of the need to dissolve learned patterns that are exclusionary and not inclusive. Venus is on the South Node in the 4th house. This is speaking to our home on planet Earth and the distortions that are going to be coming up around this time that stem from these distortions. It's going to be really highlighted and emphasized at this time. And we can see that the sun during this transit is in Virgo in the 3rd house. So the need to improve upon what it is that we need to learn. And that's about co-creation, seeing as Leo is the ruler of that. The sun is the ruler of that Leo that's on that 3rd house. So when Leo is naturally expressed, it's about co-creation with something much larger that benefits humanity. And humanity is the sign of Aquarius. And Aquarius is on that 9th house cusp. And this gives us more information. But this is about returning to natural law for humanity and the need to improve upon the knowledge so we can co-create with humanity and nature herself. And we can see that Uranus is in the 11th house stationary and Taurus ruled by that Venus. To me, this can really reflect where we can have some natural disasters occur as a way to shock 11th house Uranus, the system, to highlight the imbalances that can be coming up that are perpetuated by distortions. And that way it can give us a chance to make a lifestyle change for humanity, to liberate from these old values. And then we have Pluto re-entering the sign of Aquarius in 2024 in November. Again, here we have it. Pluto's in the 6th house, a mutable house. Again, ruled by Uranus in the 11th, which is retrograde. And it's really important to remember that retrogrades can speed up evolution because it's an individuating factor. But it's also, I think of retrogrades as relive, redo in order to repeat. We've got Chiron retrograde, Neptune retrograde as well during this time. So Pluto in the 6th house is the need to liberate from crystallized man-made structures. And look at this, Capricorn is intercepted, ruled by Saturn and Pisces. In the 8th house, the need to get to the bottom of what these distortions are as a way to liberate from them, and that's through objectifying them so that the liberation of these types of values can occur. So there can be instances coming up in our personal lives and on collective levels where we're seeing a repeated pattern. Something from the past is now in the present moment again, and it's a way for us to redo it, to resolve it. And with Uranus being ruled by Venus and Capricorn, whenever it is naturally expressed, is about really stepping outside of the status quo and structuring life around natural law. instead of the distortion of that, which is man-made law. And man-made law is the other archetype of Capricorn. So there's a need to self-improve upon restructuring what our values are and to give it structure that is held within natural law. And that is also seen with Sag being on the 6th house cusp and being ruled by Jupiter and Gemini retrograde in the 11th house. So the way that we improve upon this is through liberating from these old beliefs that have been learned. And as we do that, we get to expand upon natural law that is based and rooted in giving, sharing, and inclusion, and has the ability to help humanity as a whole. Again, Aquarius is on the 7th house cusp. So there's a need for us on a deep, deep level to self-actualize personally and get back in touch what is natural to recover our natures as a way to facilitate in this process for humanity. Because whenever enough of us do our own personal work in this way, it creates a ripple effect. And then we get to have community. And then community gets to band together, and then it gets to liberate from these social structures by standing up. This is why anytime we see Pluto and Aquarius throughout history, or Pluto aspecting Uranus, we see social and civil change. We see civil rights movements. We see all of these dynamics because it's people, community, Aquarius coming together to liberate from the distortions of exclusionary behavior. And then with the Virgo Pisces nodal shift happening on January 11th in 2025, Pluto is going to be in Aquarius, and the nodes are going to be honestly they're in paradoxical. This is a paradoxical chart, meaning that Aries is, Libra is on the 1st house instead of Aries. So everything's flipped around. Usually Virgo in the natural zodiac would be on the 6th house cusp, but you have its polarity here. And so there's this need for massive amounts of integration to happen. And on a collective evolutionary level, we're going to be learning through crisis as a way to dissolve these dynamics. Mercury is in Capricorn in the 3rd house, ruling that south node. So again, this theme of crisis stemming from patriarchal learning that's not rooted in natural law and the need to improve upon natural law. The 3rd house cusp is ruled by this Jupiter that's in the 9th house. It's a natural Sag house. So again, a need to expand upon the knowledge of natural law, Jupiter and Gemini in the 9th. It's retrograde. So it's about recovering this on a societal level, culturally, all of these things, understanding the difference between a belief and a truth. And as we do this, Pluto in Aquarius, ruled by Uranus in the 8th house, retrograde, is about liberating from how we've structured society in different countries of origin that are creating and perpetuating this. It's also about getting into a pure emotion, which is the way to evolve, to not suppress it, to liberate from those dynamics, and to get to the bottom of these distortions. So that way we can reclaim natural values and natural needs. Neptune is on the North node. Again, it's this repeating signature as we improve upon these dynamics through dissolving them and restructuring society. It helps us to not only self-improve, but to purge these delusions, Pisces, revolving around the distortions of man-made law, and to tap into what's actually timeless and universal. So, I don't know if you have questions or you want to jump on here, but this is kind of my spiel about all of this.
Sorry, I had to get off mute. Thank you so much. This has been wonderful. I feel like you've really, anytime I had a question in my mind throughout this entire lecture, you answered it within like 3 or 4 seconds. So I'm not sure if there are many questions, but I suppose what are small acts? What are small ways that we could really kind of maybe rethink our day-to-day activities, that you think that could be small but collectively proactive ways in which we could move towards a more equitable future for ourselves, and with divine law in mind and natural law in mind?
Yeah, so it's really starting, the best way to do this is to start questioning how you even view nature. Like, and then to expand out in little self-improving ways. Like, you could plant a garden, because here's the thing about this. There's all of this, there is war, there is destruction going on, but at the end of the day, if Earth isn't survivable, none of that even matters, right? And so helping out our plant and animal friends. If you see if it's really hot in your area, you know, making a little water fountain with marbles in it for bees and for squirrels. It's also where you can compost or you can recycle. You can also vote is a really big one. Vote that's in alignment with values that are rooted in giving, sharing, and inclusion, not in exclusionary behaviors. It's about, because of all of the Virgo energy and sixth house energy we're seeing, it's about speaking up for the underdog, giving a voice to the voiceless, empowering that, challenging your own beliefs and asking yourself, where does this come from? And actually, how has this affected me? Has it perpetuated crisis in my life? I know from my own point of view, there have been things in my life that have been distortions of natural law that I was taught and indoctrinated into whenever I was younger. One of them is codependent relationships. That's a distortion of natural law. Codependency is the antithesis of giving, sharing, and inclusion. And so crisis happened in my life whenever I was too codependent, right? And so even these little areas that we don't think are really rooted in natural law, start to use Uranus and Taurus, question it. Where did this value come from? Where did this need? How do I get my needs met? Am I being self-reliant? Because self-reliance is a natural law. In order for the species to survive, it has to be self-reliant, correct? And so even on a personal level, asking yourself, how can I be more self-reliant? What are my actual values? What are my actual needs? How can I meet them for myself? And then find community that is rooted in that, and understanding, just questioning everything. Pluto and Aquarius, going back into it, is really going to highlight a lot of this. It's going to have us objectifying these dynamics because it's just getting too out of control. The other dynamic is join a co-op if you can. I have a friend who totally rooted in natural law. She's autistic, and she has a nonprofit for missing and murdered Indigenous people. And her tagline is "Silence is betrayal," which stems from an MLK quote. She's, aligned her own values with giving voice to those who are voiceless. When you see something, speak up about it. Again, going back to voting, don't miss out on, it's the small voting within your society that counts, right? It's not just, the presidential elections or the governors. It's who, have you been voting for your Senate? If not, start educating yourself on that. That way you can put people into office who have your best interest at heart, that aren't trying to be exclusive, and exclusionary. It's these little things that a lot of us tend to not do until it's the big moment that we're needing to do right now. And that's a Virgo phenomenon. Virgo is about taking things step by step. Oh, are you there? There you are.
Yeah, I had another question. Something we talk about a lot in evolutionary astrology is unnatural guilt. Unnatural guilt being another way that we don't practice natural law.
Absolutely.
I'm wondering if you could talk about this for just a moment, and then also maybe some of the repercussions that come from natural guilt. It's something I really struggle with a lot. I feel like it will probably resonate with a lot of my audience.
Yeah, so the first thing I want to say is Virgo Pisces also correlates with sadomasochism, which is a fundamental distortion of natural law. Meaning, masochism is I feel guilty for something and I don't know why and I need to atone. And it's unnatural. It's usually stemming from religious cosmology. I see this a lot with people who have a heavy Virgo 6th house, Pisces 12th house dynamic. They carry a lot of unnatural guilt stemming from indoctrination of religious cosmologies. And religious cosmologies are an absolute distortion of natural law. At one point in time, they were natural.
Like, I think when you, for example, I are neurodivergent, and I hear this so often from my clients. And this might be the number one thing I hear from my neurodivergent audience is there are certain ways in which we are indoctrinated to have to be in a society, nicety, social certain ways to do like a particular, I mean, something as mundane as like laundry or something like that,
Yes.
or cooking a meal, or
Being
you know,
shamed
riding the
for it.
subway. Yeah, and you get shamed for it. And this is especially true when we're in interpersonal relationships and friendships, even co-working relationships, familial relationships. And so a lot of people come to me as a practitioner, and they're often like, you know, I used to think that there was something wrong with me. People, you know, I couldn't keep friends. People were always mad at me. Sometimes they wouldn't tell me why they were mad at me and they just stopped talking to me. Other times it felt like they were always mad at me for something I didn't do properly. I didn't pay a bill. I forgot my card, and then, you know, ADHD people kind of deal with guilty. But some people can take that as, you know, someone trying to get one over on them, or taking advantage of them, or they should know better. And I feel like this is a huge thing with my audience, where learning to recognize that these are social conditionings that are not in alignment with natural law. So the relief of because with that guilt comes oftentimes overcompensation, codependency, as you said before, overgiving, overdoing, because you have to prove your worth, you know, like all of that. So I'm curious, are there other things in alignment with that maybe I'm not thinking of that come from that background? Yeah.
I mean, and the best way to understand this is to objectify it whenever guilt comes up. Like, oftentimes women feel a lot of unnatural guilt, same with autistic people, for saying no, for having a healthy boundary. Then we feel so guilty and then we self-abandon. So what I challenge people to do is to observe this within themselves whenever guilt comes up and start asking themselves, is this learned or is this natural? Because natural guilt is, let's say me and you get into an argument and I tell you you're a piece of fucking shit, and then I walk away and I feel guilty. That's because it's going against natural law to harm someone else, even with words, right? It's, you know, but if I'm feeling guilty for being sovereign and staying whole into myself, which is oftentimes what happens with neurodivergent people, and I would say a lot of women and queer people as well, is there's an immense amount of guilt. This is another thing I want to speak to. Queer people who feel a lot of guilt about their sexuality. There's a lot of people who are straight who feel a lot of guilt about their sexuality. Sexuality is natural. It's a naturally occurring phenomenon. To have sex is a natural thing. And think about how the patriarchy talks about how you have to be pure, or you have to do this, or slut shaming. All of these things are unnatural guilt. And so whenever this comes up, the best way to do it is, like I said, to ask, is this learned Or is this natural? Was I shamed for this? Shaming is not natural. Shaming stems from incorrect judgment, of judgmental patriarchal behavior that induces learned guilt, and it perpetuates distortions in our life that eventually create crisis for us, right? A lot of times it's a mental crisis, a conscious, a crisis in our belief. Can I trust myself? Do I know myself? What do I believe? Are they right? Am I wrong? Am I right? I feel like I'm right. It's all of that, right? And so really asking and objectifying, has this been learned? Even around our own sexualities. Because if you're doing something that is actually natural, right? I'm AFAB. I had a partner who had a penis, right? Like, we have those anatomically for a reason. It's, guess what? To procreate and to have sex. Like, and so people shouldn't be feeling guilt for doing these types of things either, right? That stems
Yeah.
from patriarchal conditioning. It's just the same as men can go out and have sex with whoever they want, but women are not allowed to do that. They're tainted. That's a belief, right? It's a belief, meaning lie is held in the middle of that word. It's a lie. It is not a naturally occurring truth because it's creating a distortion of inequality instead of equality. And so it's just these kind of dynamics. The best thing you can do is to objectify and ask, is this learned or is this natural? And to also objectify your own self-judgments. What are your self-judgments? What are they stemming from? Is it learned self-judgment? Is it actually rooted in something that's healthy? Are you able to discern and make correct judgment, or are you being judgmental to yourself? And where does that stem from? What kind of indoctrination, what kind of belief or cosmological system that shaped your values and needs, right? And so it's really starting to challenge all of this to get back to natural.
Yeah. I was thinking a lot about equity and inclusion. You were talking about that earlier. And there's a term, inequity, inequity aversion. And it describes the type of anger that someone might feel. Maybe it's a queer person, maybe it's a neurodivergent person, when they don't see like representation of them, and then like they're perpetually ignored when they try to advocate for that. And I'm just thinking about like, I was talking about this with a dear friend recently, and they were talking about they didn't really know what to do with their anger, right? Like, because it can be very angering when you're on the other side of that and you're like, trying to meet a survive your survival needs, and other people, just don't see you as an equal, worth having that conversation. And I was thinking about, and we're in a society that's extraordinarily hierarchical, but what are ways that we can point this out in a way where, I mean, if I began to talk about natural law with I don't know, a CEO of a company, they'd probably think I was a little delulu, right? But what are ways that we can maybe clearly state a boundary, without maybe that really shows evidence, maybe perhaps of what that does to a person or to a society when A can't meet B. I hope that makes sense.
It kind of does. You broke up a
Does
little
that
bit.
make sense?
Yeah.
I guess one way that somebody could articulate these ideas, to maybe a boss, a coworker, whoever, when they don't feel like they're included, because another question we get very often is like, what do we do with the anger that we feel when we ask for inclusion and we're not heard? Is there a way to maybe bring this up in a way that feels less maybe woo-woo?
Yeah. Well, and the funny thing is natural law isn't woo-woo, right?
Yeah.
It's natural. And you can already see the distortion that people will think that it's woo-woo.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, here's the thing. The fact of the matter is that 70% of the population is the consensus. And so they're going to buy into whatever propaganda. It's the blind leading the blind. And that gives way to anyone who's trying to individuate on some type of level, meaning to think for themselves, to advocate for themselves, to step out of the mainstream in some type of way. A lot of projections are made onto these people because what it does is it's challenging the consensuses, beliefs, which is where their security lies. And really the only thing that we can do is to keep advocating and then to also plant seeds. And whenever it comes to our anger, we're also indoctrinated so often that anger is bad. Anger is natural. It's natural.
Yeah.
Um,
So you that anger is, so I guess a great response would be that like you should not be shamed for your anger.
absolutely.
It's a natural part of feeling not included.
Absolutely, or not heard. And that's what you can
Yeah.
say is you're not hearing from where I'm coming from. We can agree
Yeah.
to disagree. That's the natural law of relativity there. But if you're going to respect me on a human level, I need you to attempt to hear where I'm coming from because I'm not
Yeah.
feeling heard. And so it's advocating for yourself in that way, because advocating for yourself in that way, even when anger arises, to emotionally validate that, because that
Okay.
creates more self-reliance. You know what I'm saying? Um,
Yeah.
and
I
so
think are really going to appreciate that because that is like something that people talk to me about constantly, and inequity aversion in their workplace, maybe socially for younger people who are still in school, that's something that people talk to me a lot about, and their frustration and their anger, and they don't feel like they have like a place to channel it or a way to talk about that in a way. And I guess that just taking away that unnatural guilt for having the anger, I think is part of it,
absolutely.
right?
And here's the other thing is with the transiting nodes still in Libra, that's where we can be one, Libra, Aries, experience anger stemming from someone not listening to us, Libra, from
Yeah.
hearing where we're coming from, right? And
Hmm.
the thing that I do want to say is like no one's truth needs to be defended. It's okay to defend it, but your truth does not need to be defended, and your self-worth does not amount to what someone is projecting onto you.
Yeah.
And the other dynamic is within the Libra archetype. It's about, and I'm not talking about this to necessarily, if advocation for self in the workplace is a must, okay? An absolute must. Your hands can be shaking, you can be terrified, but it's a must because that's self-love. It's being in self-dignity. There's a couple of lessons within the South Node of Libra. One is knowing whom to share with and whom not to, though. And I'm not talking about advocation. It's if I'm in an oppressive family system and I keep talking about how I'm feeling and they're shutting me down, that's a great Libra lesson. They can't hear where I'm coming from. And so they're not safe for me to talk to and express myself. Now I need to talk to people who I can, learning the lesson of who is safe to share with, where I can be vulnerable and express myself. That's a really good way to navigate anger. And then the other dynamic, and that goes back into, is someone able to hear where you're coming from, to hold space for you, right? Knowing who to share that with. If someone is, Saturn and Pisces is legitimately confronting us with the truth of reality. So I've seen lots of people who've had things come up with family, Saturn, where they are now being confronted with the truth of the reality. South Node in Libra, these people can't listen to me. They're oppressive. They don't want to hear me. And so it creates anger. And that anger is natural. And it's something that people need to understand. Any type of way that this shows up, it's something that needs to be validated. And I think even just validating that helps and to rebalance, right? That you're not wrong. Something's not wrong with you. You're not bad. That person just can't understand where you're coming from. And they're choosing maybe to have even willful ignorance about it, right? Because it's challenging their security of what they believe. by you just being yourself or speaking the truth. That's something I've seen happen a lot lately.
Yeah.
And then the other dynamic is, the other Libra lesson is, if you have something that you do need to say, that you have to advocate for, right? There's a Libra lesson that not to have a certain expectation, or to have an outcome, that person can do whatever they want with that information. Again, that can be very fucking angry, you know, because
Expectations cause resentment.
absolutely. And so that is a Libra lesson of learning. I can plant a seed, I can speak my truth, and that should be good enough. Like on a personal level, right? That doesn't mean if an injustice is created, oh, I said what I need to say, that's done. No, you can tap into that Aries energy and be a warrior for advocation as a way to heal anger, right? Anger can actually be really healthy whenever it is channeled correctly. Think about all of the civil rights leaders. You don't think that these motherfuckers weren't pissed off? Hell yeah, they were. And they channeled that anger in a constructive way and in a healthy way, right? So it's learning, how do I do this? And Pluto entering Capricorn is going to help with this emotional maturation process. And it's through the self-reflection of, okay, this is coming up for me again. I have to advocate for myself. What correct judgment can I make through looking at my incorrect judgment? Because Capricorn correlates to wisdom. Wisdom is only gained through incorrect judgment. If we were making correct judgment all the time, there wouldn't be wisdom. There would be no learning. And so there's okay, last time I brought this to this person, they didn't hear me. So if you're in a situation with work, family, friends, whoever, and you get the chance and opportunity to say something again, they can do with that information what they want. But guess what? Libra is about the boundary lies within the one who creates it. It's not about controlling an outcome. It's about, I'm speaking my truth. And whatever your reaction is to that, now I've got to make a choice to protect myself. And that's part of making a correct judgment call in that moment through self-reflecting. Let's say that someone does the same thing again whenever you talk to them. Now the boundary lies within you. You've stated your boundary. Now you've got to make a choice that feels authentic to you. Are you going to keep allowing this in your life? Or are you going to say, no, you've shown me your colors? And then you can process the anger, you know, on your own. And it creates separation and objectivity to actually process that in a healthy way instead of continuously, you know, being in that subjective reality with someone. So does that answer questions? I hope it does.
So
Okay.
wonderful. And so everyone, you can find Jordyn at Nonconformist Conscience, and that is on Instagram. You also have a channel called Nonconformist Conscious on YouTube, and you know, you do these wonderful videos over there, and you can find her website. She does readings over there as well. And we're gonna have you back. We were gonna talk about, I think our next lecture we talked about was having you back to talk about Virgo and Pisces and the archetype of sadomasochism and martyrdom and all that. And I was like, oh, right on brand. So we'll have to have all for that.
Yes, love it.
Thank you
so much.
You're welcome. And is there any other links that you needed to give out, or did I cover it?
No, you covered it. You've got me down pat.
Well, everyone go follow Jordyn. She's the best. I love having her here, and she's going to be back for horoscopes soon. So we're excited for that too. And you can check out a few of her other workshops she's done over here as well. We did a really great workshop on Pluto transiting through the 9th house. That was super informative. So give a round of applause for Jordyn at home, and a big thank you, and leave her lots of comments and do all the things. Everyone have a great evening, and thanks for tuning in.